We are starting live. We're getting here. I see Q is already here. I don't know what time he came in, but yes, he is first. We're going to give it about a minute. Got a lot to talk about. Holy cow, there's so much going on. A lot of it is all in the same state. A lot of stuff is going on in Florida. Some of it's not like immediately relevant, but it's worth talking about because it fits into a broader issue of things. Of course, there's the big breaking news from Matt Gaetz and Rudy Giuliani, so we'll go over those. So welcome, everyone. We're about a minute in. This is Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name's David. This is our weekly live stream. Next week, I think we're going to be doing more a little bit with Twitch. And if you like this channel, please like and subscribe. If you don't like the channel and hate watch me, like and subscribe as well. Follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas, and we can go from there. So look, what do we got covered today? There's a very ridiculous lawsuit about people who don't seem to understand what happened on the 6th. There is we have to talk about Florida. We have to talk about their bill for. Hold on, let me check my notes because I have a lot on Florida. Okay, we have the 1619 project. Mitch McConnell just talked about it. We got to just discuss it because it's part of an overall attack on just education with this coupled with critical race theory. We have the Clean Water Bill passed, not unanimously though, because apparently there are Republicans who don't believe that you should have clean water, and it's not going to really be a surprise which ones they are. We have Florida. So in Florida we have a private school that is just run by lunatics. So we're going to cover that, and then this is something I mentioned in my my Florida Go to Florida video. It's the Bright Futures funding. So this is a scholarship, and basically what they wanted to do with this scholarship originally was change it. So it supplements somewhere between 75 and 100% of people's college funding, but they wanted to change it to say that you can't do it if you can't get this scholarship if your major doesn't lead to a high level of employment or a high skilled level job. So that got taken down or changed. Let's see what else we got. We got a couple things on West Virginia. We have both Stephanie Ruhle eviscerating their governor this morning, and then Joe Manchin doing some Joe Manchin things, unfortunately. So the Stacey Abrams, everyone saw the clip a couple weeks ago, maybe it was just a week ago, time is no meaning anymore, of Senator Kennedy asking Stacey Abrams, you called this bill bad. What in this bill is bad? Well, she had a 2-minute thing, and because that wasn't enough time, she now has a 6-minute video, and we're going to watch that. And then, let's see, so I was watching Fox, and the only reason we're covering this is it was Martha McCallum, I think it was talking to Ronna Romney McDaniels. She is the head of the RNC. They were talking about why the family leave stuff in the Americans Family Plan is actually bad. You're not going to believe it, but it's really bad. We have a border update. I've generally ignored what was going on with the border because I said I wanted to get more information. I wanted to get more updates. So there's that. And then, of course, we have the ever expanding Matt Gaetz digging himself a hole, and the new surprising news that Rudy Giuliani might actually face justice for something. So with that, let's get started on some of these articles. So the first thing is incredibly infuriating. It's not this. It's this one. Ashley Babbitt's family plans to sue Capitol Police and officers who fatally shot her. Now, for those of you who don't know who Ashley Babbitt is, she was the only rioter shot during the January 6th insurrection. Now, let's be clear, for all you dumb fucks out there who I keep arguing with, it was an insurrection. Oh, but they didn't have weapons, but they weren't successful. They did have weapons. They didn't have firearms, thankfully, but it wasn't mean because they didn't attempt to. There was definitely officers who said they tried to take my gun. That one who had a heart attack got a heart attack because they tased him with his own taser. They damaged. It was like 140 officers were hurt. And those people were like, oh, well, they weren't really trying to they didn't complete it, so it didn't happen. So attempted crimes aren't a thing now? Is that what you're saying? Attempted crimes don't exist? There's that. So that's a stupid talking point there. And then the other talking point is, oh, well, they didn't really mean to think about it. There were some of them who did. The overall point of them being there was to overturn the election. It was an insurrection. It was the worst attack on our capital since, or worst attack on democracy since the Civil War. And for those of you who don't understand what the Civil War is about, because that's an issue as well, because in Louisiana, they're trying to say that you have to learn about the good about slavery. The Civil War was so that they could keep slaves. And if you argue, oh, it's about states' rights to do what? Keep slaves. That's what it's about. So there's that. Also, we have further on that, when they talk about moving statues, and this is something that comes up from time to time, they talk about taking out statues like, oh, these are great heroes of like Robert E. Lee, Nathan Bedford Forrester, that massive like monument somewhere in the South for the Confederacy. Those are all anti-American traitors. They should not be celebrated in any way, shape, or form. They are the most anti-American people you can imagine. They did not want to be part of America. That's why they killed Americans. So that's about it. This is incredibly crazy. Anyone who says this officer deserves any punishment is an idiot. The only reason we should know this person's name is to give them a fucking medal. The fact that she's the only one who died is just a goddamn miracle, because they would have done so much worse had those rioters not been the white Trump supporters. So let's go to the next article. Mitch McConnell wants to remove the 1619 Project removed from federal grant programs. Now, the 1619 Project is a New York Times project that what it does is it makes sure. Hold on. It makes sure that. All right. Anyway, it makes sure. It talks about the way America is founded. So generally, people assume its founding starts in 1776. They're arguing that it starts earlier because that's when the first slaves came in 1619. So what it does is it changes the historical perspective to look more at the impact of slavery. Now, this makes Republicans mad because they don't like to look at the evils of the country. But look, we're not a perfect country, and the people who argue, oh, there's no racism because we had a black guy president or Kamala Harris is vice president. You have to understand the backlash to them and the things that were said about the prior. Even senators were arguing that Kamala Harris was not really an American. I don't remember if that was Don Jr. pushing that as well. There's a good chance if it was. But the 1619 Project, although it has had some pushback from actual scholars, it's only on a specific point, on one point, and not the entirety of it. The reason I'm not going in depth into the 1619 Project is because I don't care. The whole point of this is just to take a different look at things. Too often our history has been whitewashed. There is a reason why during the Watchmen show, that first scene where they're doing the Tulsa bombing was such an impactful scene because a lot of people did not learn about it. There are things that need to be taught better in schools. The 1619 Project isn't being so much taught. It's an option for teachers if they want to do it. It's mostly like a side project to explain things. Unlike what the Trump administration argued, which was for patriotic education, which is basically America is the greatest, America has always been good, America is the land of free. It's unbelievably bad. So I'm happy that ended. So look, this and the critical race theory, they say, are communist Marxism, anti-American, socialist, Buddhist mongrels who hate America. That's what type of things they push. That's not how it is. That's not what critical race theory is. Whenever there's a discussion about race, the Republican response to it is almost always wrong. This idea that, no, we're not a racist country. There's no systemic racism. These are things that exist. They're still there. They still exist. Having these theories out there, because it's a theory, it's not indoctrinating your child. It's not the critical race theory does not say the color of your skin is the only thing that matters. That's not how it works. So the PragerU video on it is wrong. If you want to see my response to it, it's called Pro-Slavery PragerU Tries to Talk About Critical Race Theory. If you actually go on Twitter and find their video of it, of the guy, I've tagged my comments into it. Or you could follow me on Fresh Faces New Ideas, or you can follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas, because I've tweeted about it a couple times, and you can find the video there. So let's go on to our next story. Senate opens floodgates, passes bipartisan $350 billion water infrastructure bill. Now, remember, we were told that Joe Biden has done nothing but push people away. Now, this is now the second bill that has passed overwhelmingly. This one was the Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act, passed overwhelmingly by a vote of 89-2. So, look, for people who say this is how you get bipartisanship, yeah, because it's an overwhelming popular bill, and Republicans realize it looks really bad to vote against this, with the exception of two of these people. And as usual, we have our litany of choices. We're going to spin the wheel terrible. Is it going to land on Josh Hawley? Is it going to voted the lone vote against the anti-Asian hate crime bill? And the reason he was the lone vote is because Ted Cruz was crying about this at the Supreme Court. And I don't even know where Rand Paul was. I don't know if Tom Cotton was there, but it's either is the terrible person of the day. Is it Ted Cruz? Is it Josh Hawley? Is it Tom Cotton? Is it Rand Paul? Is it Lindsey Graham? Is it Marsha Blackburn? Who is it? Well, the answer is Ted Cruz, who fell asleep during the Georgia address, and Mike Lee. Now, keep in mind, one of the things actually pointed to for the reasoning for this bill, billions of dollars to upgrade drinking water and wastewater infrastructure projects across the country. Lawmakers pointed to the 2014 lead contamination crisis in Flint, Michigan, and water outages in Texas this winter. Now, of course, Ted Cruz would know nothing about this, because even though he's the senator there, and people are like, well, what can Ted Cruz do? He can't do anything. He has to go to Cancun. He ran away to Cancun, came back for one day in Texas, did one photo shoot, and then went to CPAC instead of helping people. 200 Texans died. This could have been avoidable had Texas actually done something about its power grid. And it's also an issue because they don't regulate how they do their CO2 alarms. And I was reading an article today about how a vast majority of those deaths came from people who got CO2 poisoning because they didn't have energy, so they had to run their cars inside. So that was one of the things. So yes, they decided not to vote for this. And then let's see the reasoning for it. So this is about the best reason I can find for this. So Ted Cruz was too busy on Twitter, was complaining about woke corporations. And then Mike Lee potentially had an amendment. So the version of Mike Lee's objects to is the president's ability to declare national monuments. So this is... He thinks that because you can't declare a national monument, that his amendment, which wasn't adopted, would have preserved existing water rights when new monuments were declared. So if you already have water, if a company already has access to the water, or they have the rights over that water when a new monument is declared, like it's the Bears Ears or the Grand Escalante elevator, something like those, the government would then take control of those rights. So that's what he was against. And then the guess for Ted Cruz is that he did some type of amendment with Marco Rubio, and the way that Marco Rubio's amendment failed is because he had a mistypo, and then they were like, you know what, we're not going to deal with this anymore. And then, but even he still voted for it, so it's not clear. So it's worth mentioning that Ted Cruz, we don't know where he stands on anti-Asian hate. We have to assume he'd vote no, because that's who he is. But we do know that Ted Cruz is against clean water. We also know he's against checks. It's worth remembering every single day that any relief you've gotten, or your town has gotten, or your state has gotten from the American Rescue Plan was done not only by the Democrats, but over the complaints of every single Republican. And when they try to push through the American Jobs Plan, and if it is neutered, it is because of Republicans and it's because of Joe Manchin. And if it is passed, the $2.25 trillion is passed through reconciliation, it will be because Republicans don't want better bridges, they don't want more jobs, and they don't want better access to broadband. They say they want these things, but they're not willing to actually put the money in to make sure that they happen. So let's go on to the next story. So there's this private school in Miami, and the owners are out of their goddamn minds. Why is this important? It's not super important, but it's important in a way that in the broader sense. Why it's important that Miami and Republicans, they're very anti-education. There's a reason they're always saying that liberal colleges are liberal, and its left-wing ideology is going at your kids, and they're against higher learning, and they're constantly cutting funding for public schools. That's why they push for school choice, which is not actually a way to help students. That's why they push for these private schools. That's why they push for charter schools, which don't actually, that help students. So why is this important? They let their employees know they have three options. Inform the school if they've already been vaccinated so they can keep physical distance from students. Let the school know if they get vaccinated before the end of the school year, as we cannot allow recently vaccinated people to be near students until more information is known. Wait until the school year is over to get vaccinated. They said teachers who get the vaccination over the summer will not be allowed to return until clinical trials of the vaccine are complete, and only if the position is still available at that time. So if you don't take the vaccine, you can keep this job. And why do they believe this? Why do they believe the vaccine is dangerous? Well, because they're crazy. Who is the person who runs it, Ms. Centra, who's frequently shared anti-vaccine posts on Facebook, claimed in a letter that reports have surfaced recently of non-vaccinated people being negatively impacted by interaction with people who've been vaccinated. Even among our own population, we've had at least 3 women with menstruation cycles impacted by having spent time with a vaccinated person. So there's this idea that apparently vaccinated people can pass the vaccine to other people through their reproductive systems. I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, I didn't know. I knew that obviously wasn't a thing because it's not something that happens. I didn't know that was a conspiracy theory. The other problem with this is this private school. They put up screens on their windows because they don't want the 5G to get into to mess with people's heads. So yeah, if you see this private school and you're in Florida, and I actually have any viewers, I have no idea if I have viewers in Florida, stay away from it. This is a crazy person. Anyway, let's continue to the next Florida thing. So they have this fund in Florida. It's called the Bright Futures, scholarships. Measure SB 86 included a proposal that would eliminate Bright Futures scholarships for students who didn't pursue certain degrees. It was changed by Braxley, that's the person who introduced it, in part opposing reducing scholarships amounts to students not seeking degrees on approved listed programs. But an amendment filed Monday, but Braxley will no longer tie scholarships award amounts to certain degrees. The measure is scheduled for a hearing Tuesday. This was, when was this particular article written? Yeah, it doesn't say. Okay. So under Braxley's amendment, the State University System Board of Governors, the State of Education, Independent Colleges, University of Florida, would craft and publish lists of degrees they deem not likely to lead to employment. However, the list would not have no bearing on how Bright Futures scholarships and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this, for National Merit Scholarships are awarded. Look, these are important scholarships for the students. They actually rely on them a lot because of how, like, some of them base their whole college future based on these scholarships. So this idea in Florida is now there's 2 things that are now going on in Florida. One, they passed a law, and this is in my Florida Going to Florida video, saying that if you're in a college, you can tape your professor and use that as an argument for political bias, and from there say that you can get them removed because you believe they're not being they're leaning too far in one direction. So that way you're pushing because they're not allowing you to present your ideas of free speech. This goes against the tolerance paradox. We are not such a tolerant community that we can accept the voices of everybody. And I don't mean that by saying all conservative voices are bad. I mean that there are fringe voices that should not be heard, and those are of Nazis. Okay? Also, black separatists and Hopetep people are not voices that we should be listening to either. So, when you have these type of rulings where you're first of all, you're dictating what jobs these kids can get. Because if you're saying, okay, well, I'm only going to fund whatever I believe is going to create a job, so therefore you're limited. So let's say I want to go into be an artist. Well, that's not what type of employment is that going to count under? Versus what if I want to be a businessman? Versus what if I want to do poli-sci? What if I want to do what are these other more obscure degrees? What if I want to be an anthropologist? What if I want to study something specific, like something niche? When you go to college, first off, on average, people change their majors. It's like 2.5 times before they graduate. Also, most 18-year-olds have no idea what the fuck they want to do. I didn't. Well, I had an idea, but I didn't end up doing it. I changed my major. I bounced around for a whole bunch of different jobs before I kind of settled into what I'm doing now. They don't know generally. But by changing this scholarship, you're basically influencing an entire generation. You, the Republican government of Florida, are deciding what the future of your state is going to look like by saying that if you do not align with these approved jobs, we will not fund your college education. That's 1984. And I don't know if I'm using it correctly because it doesn't seem like it. But, Republicans don't use it either. So this is an incredibly stupid thing. Let's see, I got another story about it. Continued approach changes. So this is more on it. More than 110,000 college students received the merit-based Bright. So these are already smart people. His proposal initially said only students going to fields that would yield high-paying jobs could receive the awards. Now, the problem with this is also that we don't pay people enough for certain jobs. If you argue that it's a high-paying job, well, how much are you paying your teachers? How much are you paying your nurses? Versus how much are you paying your stockbrokers? How much are you paying your doctors? I mean, if you're going to be a doctor, like this, the more you think about this, the more crazy this bill is. Like, I can't believe this was actually pushed forward. And actually, this goes back into something else that I was looking at. One of the Louisiana, or in that area, Louisiana, Montana, there was a lawmaker who was pushing a law that said that that teachers had to advocate equally to different political ideas. So their argument is if you spend time focusing on one political idea, you have to spend an equal amount of time to the other. Well, that's just a flawed theory because there's a lot of ideas that are not equally presented. If you say that one idea, like take climate change, the overwhelming majority of the world, with the exception of the current Republican Party in the United States, believes climate change is real and is a threat. With the exception of the Republican Party, which is a vast minority, they don't believe it. So therefore, according to this bill, you would have to spend equidistant giving anti-science, anti-climate change arguments the same amount of time as climate change, which is partly how we ended up in this situation about climate change, is we gave the minority a 50-50 say. It is not a 50-50 say if it's a 98.2% say. That's not how this works. It's the same thing with pushing things like trickle-down economics. You know, you can argue versus growth from the bottom versus trickle-down economics, and then you'd have a more closer argument, but we have 50 years of proof that trickle-down economics doesn't work. We're actually going to see a very interesting video from a big brain, smart guy saying some really, really interesting things about taxes, not understanding, well, pretty much anything. So, look, when you see this type of thing, this overall assault on schools, whether they complain that it's Marxist theory from critical race theory or the 1619 Project, or they hate America because they want to teach you about slavery, or they want to teach you about or they say just let's celebrate the good things about America, you have to understand why they're pushing this. It's because, as it stands, one party's platform is more efficient if you are undereducated and if you aren't aware of actual facts. So as long as they can defund everything to keep you stupid, and they make it look like anti-intellectualism is actually a positive, even though you look at all the people, with the exception of Donald Trump, who run the Republican Party, they're all, Ted Cruz went to Harvard, Ben Shapiro went to Harvard, they all went to high-end schools for the most part, not Laura Boebert, who dropped out of high school, or I don't even know where Marjorie Taylor Greene went. But they're just generally very, very well educated. And the reason they don't want the people behind them more educated is because the things that they are pushing are factually insane. They just are. Trickle-down economics isn't real. The COVID is real. Mask works. Vaccines work. Go get vaccinated and then come. And once you're done getting vaccinated, go subscribe to this channel. And then, look, that's what it is. There's a reason they're pushing these things. It's not, the 1619 Project isn't anti-American. The critical race theory is not anti-American. It's not reverse racism or whatever kind of crazy other arguments they have. It's people who don't want to have their whitewashed view of the way the world of America shaken because they have this idea of it. So let's move on to the next one. What do we got next? Now we got the Stacey Abrams clip. So let me scroll down to it. No. Give me the clip. Hold on. Open link in the tab. Go back here. Give me a clip. All right, here we go. So this is 5:45. So what she does in this video, for those of you who don't remember, is Senator Kennedy asked her, she said, you called this racist and I have some issues with it. And she said, yeah, I have a whole bunch of issues with it. And he said, okay, just start listening to me. And then there was a whole lot more issues than he thought there would be. So what happened is he cut her off. So what she did in response is she took some of him asking that question to him saying, no, I need more to make this video to talk about it. So we're just going to watch this video and we're going to see just what she says. And we're going to talk about, this bill. Keep in mind, the counter to this is, Tim Scott said this, the bill actually expands voting, and it's only about, the only reason people are, the Democrats are making a big deal about this is because they're racist and they think that black people can't get voter IDs, even though a vast majority of people want voter IDs. But let's be clear, even with although the law in Texas and Florida are not as bad as Georgia law, they are all bad. And there's a reason they're passing these bills, and it's not because of voter fraud, because voter fraud doesn't exist. We've been over this time after time after time. It just isn't an issue. It is certainly not an issue that would have swayed an election somewhere between 40,000 and 7 million votes, depending on whether you wanted to win the Electoral College or the popular vote, because that would be orders of magnitude larger than all the voter fraud combined in the last 50 years. Just incalculable. So let's watch Stacey Abrams rip fake Senator Kennedy and then the rest of the Republican Party to shreds.
Tell me specifically, just give me a list of the provisions that you objected.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I know we got cut off before, so let me continue. Senate Bill 202 makes it a crime for volunteers or groups to hand a bottle of water or a snack to voters in long lines.
Which the Republicans argued isn't true. They said that's not a thing. That is absolutely a thing.
It also codifies voter caging, meaning that an individual can challenge the eligibility of an unlimited number of voters in their county. Now, imagine that conspiracy theory guy from the grocery store who doesn't think you should be able to vote. This means he can file a complaint on as many people as he likes, and the voters in question will be forced to defend their eligibility.
So this is actually a really interesting aspect. What it does is it continues on a Republican trend where you have to prove my negative false. So if somebody, because a lot of when they were pushing these ideas of, oh, we have all of these affidavits of people who said they saw something wrong, it was a lot of like, oh, there's a black guy voting. Oh, there's a Mexican voting. Oh, I didn't think that, oh, that person had a blue hat on. Something like that. Or that person looks sketchy. So one crazy person can just sit there and watch all these people come in and out and then decide, I'm going to object to all of those people. And then the people that he's objecting to have to prove that they have to prove our right to vote, not him proving that they don't have the right to vote. They have to defend themselves against a false accusation. So that's what that is.
Plus, regardless of how frivolous the accusation, county boards are forced to sit and listen to every challenge.
Remember how they said we have to know the election results by election night? If the county boards have to listen to crazy people 1 through 15 have 1,500 complaints between them across 17 states, well, how are you going to find out when we can't get the votes because X, Y, and Z lunatic wants to challenge them? How is this helping people? How does allowing that allow you to have more people access to the ballot box? How does me just walking up to a random person and say, you know what? I don't think that person should be voting. How does that allow for more people to vote? It doesn't. It's not even efficient to your system anyway.
What else?
I'm glad you asked. In support of Trump's big lie, Senate Bill 202 removes the Secretary of State from the state's Board of Elections. In fact, the Republicans in the state legislature gave themselves authority to appoint a majority of members on the board, stacking it with their allies. Now they can manipulate the rules for their own elections. But that's not all. That same state election board, a majority of which is now going to be appointed by the Republican legislature, it can now replace local elections officials, even in an entire county board of elections, on its own motion. And what that means is that they can bypass the rules and just give themselves permission. So if local elections officials do not do the bidding of Republicans in the state legislature as directed through their control of the state elections board, they can be fired for trying to do their jobs.
So how fair does that seem? And it's also worth mentioning the reason that Stacey Abrams is not currently the governor of Georgia is because the guy she ran against, Brian Kemp, was the Secretary of State at the time, he was overseeing his own election. And he was purging the rolls in order to make sure people couldn't vote before his own election. So that seems fair, doesn't it? Of course not. So how does that help election integrity if you can just override the board and replace them with your flunkies? It doesn't. But remember, this law expands voting rights and it's only about voter ID. That is the only issues Democrats have is voter ID.
Adams, you're filibustering.
And because...
What the hell? Hold on.
Of the provision.
Will have 300 fewer hours to use a Dropbox relative to last year. Into a And because I'm sure you want me to be thorough, let's recap. Senate Bill 202 shortens the runoff period from 9 weeks to 4 weeks, making it much harder for voters to learn about the new election and to request, fill out, and return an absentee ballot in time.
How does that expand the voting rights? That sounds like it stops people from being able to vote. That's what it sounds like to me. Maybe I'm just crazy.
But it also eliminates 11 days of early voting during the runoff, constricting rather than expanding voting days.
What? I could have sworn they told me they expanded voting. I thought having less days and being able to not be able to do a ballot as early, it was expanding it. That's what we were told over and over again.
I also mentioned that Senate Bill 202 bans out-of-precinct voting before 5 p.m. on Election Day. When a voter is given wrong information and goes to a different polling place, they might stand in line for hours, get to the front of the line, and be told they need to go somewhere else and get into another line to vote. And if they've got to be at work by 5 p.m., too bad. Even if they went exactly where they were told and can prove it.
What else?
So for what that means is, if your polling place is closed and somebody gives you the wrong information, whether on purpose or by accident, and you go there, and because the other polling places are closed and you're stuck online for 6-7 hours, and you show up and you say, "Hi, I'm Jim Bob Belushi from this district or from here," and they're like, "Oh, you're supposed to be, the polling station that's 6 blocks away," you can't then vote there and have your name checked off that you voted. You have to go to the other polling station and wait in that line to start over. So you just wasted that 6 hours. And God forbid we were a country that actually had election day as a holiday. What if you have to work? Well, now that person just lost their vote. But nope, that's not vote. That's expanding the vote, not shrinking it.
Per our earlier discussion, Senate Bill 202 severely limits the number and availability of drop.
What are you doing? No.
Voters will have 300 fewer hours to use a drop box relative to last year. What I didn't mention is that it also limits the number and location of drop boxes, which became very important when the mail stopped running on time. In Fulton County, our largest county, and one that is predominantly African American, the number of drop boxes will be reduced from 38 to 8 for no good reason other than Republicans want to make it harder for people of color to vote.
So, look, the argument, how many drop boxes were there before, is irrelevant. They had 38, they now have 8 for no reason. But drop boxes are rife for fraud. There was no fraud.
I also received several questions about voter identification. Senate Bill 202 has one of the strictest ID requirements in the country for casting an absentee ballot. Voters without a driver's license or state ID must surrender their personal information and risk identity theft just to receive an absentee ballot. And then there are the 200,000 Georgia voters who don't have either ID and the putative free ID that is not free when you factor in the cost of transportation and the cost of underlying documents.
Yeah, I get the idea.
Wait, that was a very important point to what I said. So when Republicans tell you that they think that that Democrats are racist because they think that black people can't get IDs, that's not what the argument is. The argument is you're putting a roadblock in front of people voting, and then in order for them to get to that roadblock, you've created other roadblocks. One example is if you make them require a driver's license, you then close down all the DMVs in that particular area. Why? Because you have to. So now the person who doesn't have a driver's license has to figure out how to go hours out of their way when they probably can't afford that anyway, to take a day off from work to get a driver's license to vote in the election. I've said this over and over again. If you want an ID system to vote, which is already an extra layer on top of the security measures we have for voting in order to register, if you want an ID to vote, you need to make it universal and free to every American. And then if something happens where they need to update it, it's free as well. Anything that costs money in order to do it is automatically setting up a barrier.
Is that everything?
Nope. With all due respect, I am not done yet, Senator. I'm sure you want full and complete information. Okay, Senate Bill 202 shortens a voter's time frame to request an absentee ballot by 109 days and stops the request period 11 days before the election. Not 10 days, not 7, not 5, 11 days, which is oddly not related to the other 11-day issue, but may be worthy of investigation by this panel. Then Senate Bill 202 bans mobile voting used in Fulton County to help elderly and disabled voters make their voices heard.
More expansion of voting means that people who are elderly and disabled have to get up and wait on lines. You can't go to their door. That's not how voting works.
11,000 Fulton County voters used mobile voting units last year. Those voters may now have to stand in longer lines to make their voices heard. Senate Bill 202 also outlaws private funding to help counties administer their elections without raising taxes on their citizens. Monies that were given to both parties in counties of every size. Senate Bill 202 also sets a new minimum standard of just 8 hours for early voting. I'm sorry I'm speaking fast, but I don't want you to get impatient. Counties could use that low bar as a justification to restrict hours. And as a rejection of the internet, This one is new. According to the Secretary of State, Senate Bill 202 will now eliminate the online absentee ballot request portal, forcing county boards to manually enter every application. And let's not forget, despite those who do not understand the practice in Georgia, under Senate Bill 202, early voting hours are going to be constricted for the first time. Counties are unable to have early voting locations open outside of specific hours, and counties could decide to shorten hours as a result of unnecessary language in Senate Bill 202. And let's not forget that Republicans wanted to eliminate Sunday voting, but we stopped them. And Republicans wanted to eliminate no excuses absentee voting, but we stopped them. And Republicans wanted to eliminate automatic voter registration, but wait for it, we stopped them. You can read the full list of objections to SB 202 at stopjimcrow2.com.
So look, that's a really good video. And maybe I'll link it, but I'm sure you can find this Stacey Abrams 6-minute, what was the actual tweet? It's literally just from Stacey Abrams. What is the date on this? The 27th, so it's 3 days ago. So look, there is no justification for this voting right bill. There is none. The election was not stolen. We do not need extra security to make sure that people who should be voting aren't voting, because it's not a thing that happens. This clearly lays out this is more than just ID. So when you hear Republicans say, oh, it's just Democrats are racist because of it, or Democrats are, they want to have fraud in the elections, there's no proof of fraud. They can't produce any proof of fraud. They're clearly more issues than voter ID is a deeper issue than, they don't think you can get an ID. They think you're too stupid. There's more to that, but that's part of the problem is as long as you have catchy phrases, you don't actually have to make an argument. You can just say dumb shit all the time. And look, there's a lot of issues with this bill. And she just laid out a whole bunch of them. And there's a lot of issues in the Florida bill. And there's a lot of issues in the Texas bill. Or in the 360 plus other bills that are being considered. And it's not being a woke corporation to argue against these bills. These bills are wrong. In America, we do not vote at the levels we should. Even in this historic election, we do not have the voter turnout that other countries do. So, vote. Make sure you know if you're in Georgia or you're in Florida or you're in one of these other states that is going to pass one of these laws. Make sure you know what your voting rights are and make sure you get on top of that soon, because the 2022 elections are coming up. And if you want to actually change the way this country goes, if you want to push it in the right direction, you need to have a vote. And how do you vote? Well, you have to fight back against laws like this. Hopefully they'll pass H.R. 1. There's a good chance that's not going to happen because of a story that I'm going to talk about later. But look, I don't know what else to say. She summed it up perfectly. This is not some fake thing that people are just freaking out of. Or the other argument that was like, oh, they're going to say we're going to ban voting. We're going to ban Sunday voting, but that didn't happen. You didn't read the bill. That was a thing that was in the bill. And nobody didn't make that out of whole cloth. It's just not Marsha Blackburn saying you can't vote on Sundays because of Jesus, when people vote on Sundays all the time. It's early voting. So as the polls was a thing. So let's continue. So I'm only highlighting this part because this is a specific segment I saw on Fox. So let's talk about the paid family leave. So Joe Biden was it's Amtrak's 50 years. So he was giving a speech about Amtrak, and then he was pushing basically his Americans Family Plan. And one of the things that was highlighted on Fox as a negative is the paid family and medical leave. So this will allow 12 weeks of paid parental, family, and personal illness to leave by year 10 of the program. It will also ensure that workers get 3 days of bereavement leave per year starting in year 1. So the things that I'm about to talk to you about were by Robin Romney McDaniels, who is the head of the RNC, and Martha McCallum. These are bad things that corporations are going to hurt corporations because people are going to be out of work. So what is covered under this? Well, the paid family and medical leave will ensure workers receive partial wage replacements, take time to bond with new children, care for a seriously ill loved one, deal with a loved one's military deployment, find safety from sexual assault, stalking, or domestic violence, heal from their own serious injuries, or take time to deal with the death of a loved one. So, any of these things are bad. And this one is particularly interesting that they're against this because, as we know, the reason the Violence Against Women Act is not been reauthorized is because the Republican Party, listening to the NRA, does not want to have the boyfriend loophole closed. What is the boyfriend loophole? It says that if you are found guilty of at least misdemeanor stalking, you are not able to purchase a firearm. Why is that a rule? Because according to data, you are significantly more likely to be killed by someone with a firearm if that person has a history of domestic assault. So, these things are bad it's good for that if you have a gun. It is bad for that if you try to take time off of work. Also, if you are seriously ill, similar to, let's say you have something like COVID, you can't heal up from that. You have to go to work. And this is a huge problem just in general with our restaurant industry. They are paid so little and they work so many hours that they can't afford to take a day off. So they show up with the flu. They show up when they're sick. Part of the reason there's such a huge strain on our healthcare system all the time is because our healthcare system is garbage, but also because people have to show up to work sick. And the reason they show up to work sick is because they can't afford to take the time off. So funding this is apparently bad. Making sure that your loved ones are taken care of, making sure that you're taken care of after you have a baby, making sure that, you can find safety after you've been assaulted, or making sure that you can, mentally come to terms with the death of a loved one. Those are bad things according to Republicans, and it's worth mentioning that all the time. Now we have some good news. Now this graph says 82%. The other one I'm going to talk to you says 84%. This is the unaccompanied children in Customs and Border Patrol custody. Now you remember when I first started talking about this, probably in March, maybe we were talking about how these were overcrowded and how the Biden administration was not ready for this influx of people. So what happened was the Biden administration changed two things. They changed the stay in Mexico policy, and they changed the use of Title 42. Now, the stay in Mexico policy basically said, if you're coming to advocate for asylum, which is a legal system in America, and you're totally allowed to do that, you can't do it. You have to stay in Mexico and wait for your appeal to come through, which is illegal. It's against our actual laws for them to have done that. Oh, and speaking of the border very quickly, the Joe Biden administration just ended all funding for the border. There was $14 billion. They ended all contracts. They ended everything that was happening down. Why? And for all you Republicans say, oh, no, now the illegals are going to come in over the wall that was supposed to be paid for by China, but we didn't pay for it from China and was already finished but not actually finished. Where did that money come from? Because Congress never gave it to him. So what happened? Donald Trump took it. He took it from the military budget. He took it from the military budget in a place where instead of funding schools on military bases, they were going to build this wall. And court after court after court ruled that this is not a constitutional thing for him to have done. So the Joe Biden administration has gotten around to taking back that money and already has gained $14 billion back. So why is this important? This particular chart is important because the children were cramped into overcrowded cages. They absolutely were. I said it when it happened. Plenty of other people said, look, the conditions they're in right now are unacceptable. It was a huge problem for the Biden administration that they were not ready for this many migrants. And I said, in a couple months, and what did he do? He sent FEMA down, and he put more resources into it. And he said, look, we're gonna fix this. We just, we're trying to work our way through the system to figure out, the most efficient way for us to do it. So normally what happens is when an unaccompanied child shows up at the border and they're seeking asylum, they get put into Customs and Border Patrol custody. And according to the Flores Agreement, they're not supposed to be there for more than 72 hours. And during that time, they're given to HHS is designed to look for a parent or guardian in order to send them to that person. Now, what was happening was there were so many kids that the system had so thoroughly been destroyed by Donald Trump that there was a massive backlog, and some of these kids were staying there for 10 to 20 days, which was insane. So this was what happened. This was in March, where there was almost 6,000. And look, we saw all the pictures, and it was a huge problem. Now there's less than 1,000. There's 82 of them. This was a couple days ago. Now let's look at this CNN article, because this is important. Number of children held at Border Patrol facilities, 84% since peak last month. As of Wednesday, there was 954 children in CBS facilities. So remember, I said that left thousands of children languishing in Border Patrol facilities for longer than 72 hours, limit set by federal law. That's the Flores Agreement. In the recent weeks, the Department of Health and Human Services, which is responsible for the care of immigrant children, has opened up a string of temporary shelters to accommodate minors. This is what we're talking about. He was opening it up in order to put them somewhere else. Now, the average time that kids are in CBP custody is now 28 hours instead of 133 hours, which is an 80% reduction in time. So, look, also, this is part of the thing that was pushed. A picture of a book like this was with Kamala Harris. I don't know what Kamala Harris's book is called. And recently, Fox News ran with the article that every child who is in this facility is being given a copy of Kamala Harris's book because the government is paying for it. And that's what Fox News ran with. It was not true. And then the person who wrote that article resigned and saying, look, they made me write this fake article and I couldn't do, and I resigned after that. Which the problem with that is you did the wrong thing first. You already wrote the article. You should have resigned first and then said it was wrong instead of writing it and then saying it was wrong. So anyway, look, there are still people coming. And the reason for that is a number of factors. The devastation left behind two major hurricanes. So when you hear Republicans argue, they're complaining that the weather is the reason for the increase in minors, but not Joe Biden's policies. First, ask them what policies that changed. If they do not mention the removal of the stay in Mexico policy or the change to Title 42, they are making it up. Those are the only two policies that Joe Biden had changed, which would cause for a change in how we do migration. That's it. Those are the only two policies. So when they're referring to weather, they're not talking about massive hurricanes that hit Central America. That's the difference. That's one of the differences. The whole coronavirus pandemic. They're leaving their countries because COVID is ravaging other countries worse than it was in America. Well, let me rephrase that. America had a better way of dealing with it now than what these other countries do. That's why we lead the world in vaccinations. We also lead the world in deaths. Although, I think I saw something that Russia has something close to 400,000. There's a good chance Russia and India might actually overtake us because we're sending them the AstraZeneca one, and we're not even really giving that to American citizens. So there's that. COVID is causing coronavirus panic and the perceived relaxation of enforcement under the Biden administration. Now, this is the one that they might harp on, but this is a misrepresentation of what it is. What the difference in the Biden administration and the Trump administration is that the Biden administration is not ripping children from the arms of their parents. So under the Trump administration, they had a zero tolerance policy. And they would rip them from their parents, and they would put them in cages. And were the cages built under Obama? Yeah, but they were not used in this way. It was designed to be cruel to make sure that they wouldn't come back and wouldn't come back. It didn't work. Okay? So because he changed that ruling ended, that's why people are coming. It's not because Joe Biden's some softy and wants open borders. The fact that these people are being arrested shows you that the borders are not open. And as for this other argument that just happened today, yesterday, he was in Georgia, and hold on one second. During his speech, he had an outdoor speech, so he also had one of those drive-in rallies. That's what he's doing, and of course, Fox News hates that because anything that's not a COVID super spreader is a weakness, according to Fox News. Some people started heckling him during the speech, and they were saying, hey, abolish ICE, abolish private prisons. And they kept saying it, and he jokingly responded, I will, give me 5 days. At which point Republicans now say, oh, look, now he's going to abolish ICE. Now, look, I agree. They should abolish ICE. For those of you who think that's a crazy statement, ICE did not exist for a long time. Also, the current iteration of ICE is a problem because of how the ICE agents act. They do not follow the directives of the commander-in-chief. They're basically an unregistered arm of the military that just abuses migrants. This is documented when the Obama administration tried to limit their power, and then when the Biden administration tried to limit their power by saying you can't deport people for during a certain time frame while we're looking at certain things, and then they deported people anyway. So ICE is an uncontrolled agency, and it should be abolished, and it should be reestablished under a more efficient, safer, better policy. There's a difference between abolish ICE and abolish the police. I don't agree with abolish the police. I agree with abolish ICE. The issue with the policing is the culture of policing. That needs to change. I haven't even talked about any of the police violence this week. There was the guy in California who was killed. There was the ongoing case with Andrew Brown where they still don't let people see the footage, and the more that they hide this, the worse it looks. There's a reason certain footage is released when it is released. The Dante Wright footage was released because they were trying to clear the officer. Their thought process was, he was resisting and she thought it was an accident, and she meant to hit him with the taser, so that way we don't have to punish her. But that's not how it is. So at some point we're going to find out about the Andrew Brown, and I guarantee you there's no way it's good. They would not hide something like this the way they have if it was he was actively a problem. All right, so let's move on to next. Okay, so now we're going on to West Virginia. Now, this is Jim Justice. He's had some interesting things. The reason they're talking about Jim Justice is one of those idiots who is joined in on... Well, no, actually, that's not even true. Jim Justice doesn't even care enough to be one of the people who is part of the anti-trans wave. So what he did was he passed one of those trans women are not allowed into girls' sports in the elementary school and on. Now, keep in mind, I've talked about this because Florida passed one of these bills too, or is attempting to. There were 12 cases in Florida since 2013. And the way these things work is, I don't just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I'm a woman. I'm going to go play girls' sports. That's not how it works. The way it works is that you have to spend a long time with doctors to make sure that this is something that you really believe, or something that really needs to be done for you. And then you start getting medication for it, and it's hormone blockers and it's puberty blockers. And then when you turn 18, you can start considering whether you want reconstruction surgery. So that's the process. Now, Stephanie Ruhle is going to rip him a new one. And I don't remember if the actual statement of whether or not... we're going to watch this, and then I'll fill in anything else.
I want to ask you about other families. The law you just signed banning transgender female athletes from playing on women's school sports teams. Can you name one example of a transgender child trying to gain an unfair competitive advantage at a school there in West Virginia?
Well, Stephanie, I don't have that experience exactly to myself right now, but I will tell you this.
Not yourself, your state, sir. Can you give me one example of a transgender child trying to get an unfair advantage? Just one in your state. You signed a bill about it.
No, I can't really tell you one, but I can tell you this, Stephanie.
He can't tell you one. So look, the only case they really have of this being an issue is PragerU found this one girl in Connecticut who complained that there was 2 transgender runners. So what happened was she was in a state qualifying race, and the top 6 went to the next level. She placed 8th and complained that the 2 transgender people who were 1 and 2 were given an unfair advantage, and that's why she could not. Her athletic future was at fault because of them. Not the four other people who placed in front of her, or the five other people who placed in front of her. Those two people were at fault. That is the only case of somebody where they can find something like this. He just said it. They don't have any reason for doing this.
Coach, and I coach a girls basketball team, and I can tell you that we all know what an absolute advantage boys would have playing against girls.
But sir, you have no examples of this happening. Why would you take your time to do this? Let's talk about other things that I can give you examples of in your state. According to U.S. News and World Report, West Virginia ranks 45th in education, 47th in healthcare, 48th on the economy, and 50th in infrastructure. If you cannot name one single example...
Look at this. This is what happens in red states. Kentucky's right up there with just as bad as this. And they don't want to do an infrastructure bill. This is on Joe Manchin, too. We're going to talk about Joe Manchin in a minute. But things like this is not good. So instead of dealing with all of these things, they decided to go after trans people because that's going to fix these things.
For me, of a child doing this, why would you make this a priority? I just named 4 things that would seem to me like a much bigger priority.
Well, Stephanie, I didn't make it a priority. It wasn't my bill.
You signed it.
I mean, it's just come to me, and I have absolutely signed it because I believe, from the standpoint of a coach, I believe that girls work so hard to obtain.
Well, he's basically just lying here. This is their new culture war. They lost the one on gay people, and now they're trying it on trans people. There is no proof that this is an issue. Zero. None. Zilch. Nada. This is just hate for another minority. And that's all there is to that. So let's talk about Joe Manchin. Now, Joe Manchin is centrist 101. And I have very strong feelings about centrists. As much as I believe that the Republican Party in its current iteration is a massive danger to the country and a huge implement in making things better, the people who are almost as bad are centrists like Joe Manchin. There is not a single bill that Joe Manchin will touch or have an issue with in this Congress, that will be made better by Joe Manchin having a play in this. Not a single one. So let's look at this. Joe Manchin also told reporters that he does not support H.R. 1, but he does support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Now, he was a co-sponsor in 2019. Why was he a co-sponsor in 2019? Because it wasn't going to pass. It's very easy to be a co-sponsor of a bill that you just want to have the clout next to your name for. It's similar to why people like Kamala Harris were co-sponsors of the Medicare for All bill and then pull back on it. Or co-sponsors are something like a Green New Deal. If you put your name next to a popular piece of legislation when you know it has no ability to pass, you can say that you supported it, even though you know it's never going to pass. And then when it comes to passing, you're not going to fight for it. Now, let's be clear. H.R. 1 would help ungerrymander the country. One of the things in H.R. 1 is it says all redistricting has to be done by a nonpartisan outside third group. So that means that you don't end up with these crazy looking gerrymandered districts like people like Jim Jordan, or where you end up Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. Now, ask yourself, why would somebody be against something like that? Well, because obviously they can't win otherwise. They have to cheat. So now, let's go to one of the other issues in H.R. 1. H.R. 1 does the public financing of elections. Now, why is Joe Manchin against that? Joe Manchin is against that because he's in bed with his corporate donors. And the corporate donors don't want public financing of election. And why does he not want that? Because that's how he gets his money. That's how he gets his power. Now, this is the truly egregious part. He also told West Virginia reporters he will not vote for any statehood bill, and appears to be his final stance. If Congress wants to make D.C. a state, it should propose a constitutional amendment. They don't need a constitutional amendment to do that. Now, Part of the reason he's against this is because if it's a 52%, if there's 52, if there's 2 more senators added, that will give the Democrats a chance to have 52 senators. Well, if you have 52 senators, and let's say that they somehow, everyone keeps their seat in 2022, and then they pick up the 2 senators from D.C. Let's say you pass this bill. Well, now Joe Manchin has no power because those 2 senators they only need 50 votes, which means they could lose senators like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. And then they can get rid of the filibuster. And then Joe Manchin isn't king anymore. So, centrism is a joke. Nobody cares, outside of Washington, whether or not 10 Republicans or 1 Republican signs onto the bill. We care. How is this bill going to make my life better? How is this bill going to make our democracy better? How is this going to put money in my pocket? How is this going to give me more health care? And people like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are making the country worse for no reason other than this fake idea of bipartisanship or their corporate donors. There's no other reasons. So let's go on to something else. We're going to move from Joe Manchin to a different big brain person. This is Ben Shapiro. Now, Ben Shapiro, him and his Daily Wire cohorts are, I actually don't even know who most of the people are. I know Michael Knowles is in this. I assume these people all staff at the Daily Wires. They are going to be talking about the end of Joe Biden's speech. They're going to talk about taxes. And to be clear, they're going to say they need to raise the taxes on poor people. This is lunacy. Now, I didn't listen to Ben Shapiro all that much prior to me starting streaming. And the reason for that is I knew he was full of shit. I generally knew that he lied. But then the more I started listening to him, as I did this because he's one of the people you talk about in the media. He has a bigger platform than me. It's easier for me to gain headlines by talking about him. You realize that it doesn't make sense that people listen to him because the things he say are incredibly stupid. Ben Shapiro's shtick is he talks super fast and sounds like he knows what he's talking about. So he throws so much garbage at the wall that you have, by the time you've sorted through the craziness of point 1, he's already on point 35. And everything is just bullshit. So I really have to wonder, like Ben Shapiro fans, what the hell are you seeing him?
I was screaming at the television when he's talking about taxes because what he is saying is so obviously asinine. When he says that rich people don't pay their fair share in this country, that is just an abject, disgusting lie. It is.
Now, before he continues, the head of the IRS just testified before Congress, and he said that if we don't increase the funding of Congress, the wealthiest people in our country will not pay taxes for somewhere. The federal government will lose out on tax revenue because the wealthiest people in the country are hiding it, or not paying it, or they're getting around it, from somewhere between $700 billion and $1 trillion a year. But go ahead, Ben. Tell us why they don't pay taxes.
A lie. The top 10% of income earners in this country pay all net taxes, not some of the net taxes, all of the net taxes, because net taxes are defined as what you pay into the government minus what you get back from the government. So if you get back from the government more than you paid in.
So what he's talking about is you use roads and I use roads and the rich people use roads, and it's, we use all the government amenities that are available to us. What he's arguing is that rich people pay in so much more than they get out of it. Except it's not something that you can totally quantify in the same way. It's a ridiculous way of looking at taxes. The way that taxes work is the more money you make, the more you should be able to put in the economy because you can afford it. So that way the people at the bottom have a chance to take a step up the ladder. You give more to the country that allowed you to be like this because you didn't just build your wealth separate from the existence of the country. you still had to take advantage of the roads. You still had to take advantage of the infrastructure. You had to take advantage of the systems that are already in place. And to fund that and to keep the government working and to make sure that you are protected and are able to continue to build your wealth, you have to put back into it. And that does mean propping up the poor and the middle class.
This means that you are not a person who paid net taxes into the government. Only the people at the top of the spectrum are paying net taxes in this country. All of the net taxes in this country. Yeah. When he says they're not paying their fair share, the only thing he means by they're not paying their fair share is it should be nearly all of your income.
Reminder, the top tax bracket used to be somewhere between like 92% before Reagan started cutting it. So also, if you don't close the loopholes, it's irrelevant what the highest percentage is. But here's what they're going to push for. What he is saying here is that you should be paying more than what the government gives you. So let's say you're one of those people who works at Amazon and you don't get, or you work at Walmart. Walmart's a better example. And you get paid, you make $10,000. Well, maybe you use $12,000 worth of government assistance, whether it's food stamps, public water, whatever it is. You use $12,000. Well, now you have to pay taxes on those $12,000 when you don't make that money. That's why the poor and the middle class aren't taxed as high, Ben. Because they can't afford it. And the reason they can't is how our system is set up. It makes more sense for the wealthy to pay more because they have the means to. And then when the people who don't have the means get up to a point where they have the means, they can pay for it. People barely survive as it is. I've shown you chart after chart showing that the current minimum wage, not a single person can live on it in any state in the country. Most of them can't even live on a $15 minimum wage in half of the country.
To the federal government. And when he says things like, I'm not going to tax anybody who's making under $400,000 a year, he is lying to you through his teeth. When he says I'm going to tax corporations...
Hold on. That's not true. So not only are they not taxing people who don't make $400,000 period, but if you're joint family, if you're a couple and you don't make $800,000, they're not going to raise your taxes. So Ben is making a statement here that he's not actually backing up the truth. He's just saying, he's just lying to you. I'm not going to prove any of the things I'm saying. I'm just saying it's an abject lie, and I'm an idiot.
Corporations are not human.
Hold on, we're going to actually roll this back because what he's about to say here is even crazier.
He is lying to you through his teeth. When he says I'm going to tax corporations, corporations are not human beings for purposes of taxes.
Corporations are not human beings for the purposes of taxes. There's a specific reason he added for taxes. Because he's one of those people who believe Citizens United is correct. That corporations are people in the essence of they draw the economy. Or they should change legislation. They should give infinite money. And yes, corporations are not. Thank you for saying that, Ben. So, in any future video of Ben Shapiro's, when you hear him say how raising the corporate tax is actually a tax on you, you should remind Ben that he has said corporations are not people. So therefore, when you tax a corporation, you're not taxing a person because it's not a person.
The money that would have been passed on to you via income is being taxed up here. That money is now being...
So what he's now explaining is trickle-down economics, which is not a thing that exists. It is only a theory, and it is not a thing that actually works. Because remember, we just saw both the massive $2 trillion tax cut that went overwhelming to the wealthy, and we just saw the largest upward transfer of wealth in the history of ever. Did any of that trickle down? No.
Drawn from the system and taken away from you. Corporations are going to have to raise prices in order to deal with the taxation effects. When he says that I'm going to tax all of these rich people on their capital gains taxes, what do you think those rich people are going to do rather than put their money in the stock market where they get taxed on capital gains?
Okay, two things. There's no proof that so if you're going to argue that if you tax them, they're going to raise prices of goods. Did anyone see the price of goods drop after the Trump tax cuts? They're getting taxed less, so they should have lowered the price of goods. Also, if they're taking their money out of the stock market, where are they putting it, Ben? How do you have a system where you say this is the best system ever, but we basically just have to do whatever the rich people say, otherwise they're going to take their money and leave. So we're at the whims of them, and they basically can never pay any taxes, and they just lord over everybody else.
They're not going to put their money in the stock market. So what happens to your 401k if you're a union member or a teacher's union member? What do you think happens to all the other 50% of the population who are invested in the stock?
That is not an accurate statement. So 90% of the wealth in the stock market is controlled by the top 10%. So 10% of the country, 90% of the country shares the bottom 10%. So yes, there are 401ks and Social Security and wealth that are tied to the stock market. And that's a problem. Because now you're invested in a system that's not actually invested in you.
Market right now. And what happens to the businesses that hire you when Joe Biden decides that your boss needs to be taxed out of existence in order so that he can determine where the dollars go? This jackass who's never created a single job in his entire life.
The people who
So before, because this is going to be an interesting statement that the other guy said. Yeah, Ben, I know you made like 18 jobs for the Daily Wire, and you hired Gina Carano, and then you're going to make more terrible movies with her. But if I'm not mistaken, Joe Biden was in charge of the Recovery Act from the first when the crash in 2008. Now that produced jobs, and also, how are you going to say he didn't make any jobs? The economy grew by 1.3 million jobs in his first 100 days. I thought that was an equivalent of that's a direct indictment of a president is the economy growth based on the jobs. So by your own logic, you're still an idiot.
A single job in his entire life.
the people who don't pay their fair share in this country are the poor. We need to raise taxes on the poor. I'm not joking.
So here's the difference between Ben Shapiro and whoever the fuck this is. Ben Shapiro's too smart to actually say this. But now we have it said. So anytime Ben Shapiro is talking about something, say you believe, or you did not push back, you believe that taxes on the poor should be raised. The people who make the least in society should pay the most. That is that's what they're advocating for. And that's really bad. It is very bad. Like, I can't even explain to you. Like, it is so stupid that I can't even explain it. It's just obvious that it's so stupid.
I'm not joking. The poor in this country pay zero. The lower middle class in this country pay net zero. So we have a group of people who pay no taxes, a group of people who pay no net taxes, a group of people who pay all the net taxes. And his argument is that it's category 3 who don't pay their fair share. Fair share means your percentage of taxes. We've determined that there are some people who shouldn't pay any percent of taxes. The only fair taxing system.
Yes, we have determined that because those people make nothing. And if you tax them, they can't live. That's why we have that's why our tax system is kind of the way it is. That's why the poor and the middle class don't pay as many taxes as the wealthy. Because and even in that statement, he couched what he said. He said they don't pay any, they pay no net taxes, they pay all the net taxes. So look, this is going to be a statement I'm going to repeat all the time because I think it was a really good line from Joe Biden's speech. Who do you want to raise the taxes on, and who do you want to cut taxes for? The Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro are advocating for raising the taxes on the poor and middle class and cutting the taxes on the wealthy. They think that the poor and the middle class should support the wealthiest people in the history of the existence of humankind. Remember, Jeff Bezos lost half of his money in his divorce and is now wealthier than what he had before he got divorced. Elon Musk, his profits have skyrocketed. So, once again, Ben Shapiro is just a terrible human being and very, very dumb. But speaking of dumb people, let's talk about Matt Gaetz. Haven't talked about Matt Gaetz for a while. So this is the Daily Beast. Daily Beast obtained a confession letter that Joe Greenberg wrote asking Roger Stone to help him obtain a pardon. Now, who's Joe Greenberg? Joe Greenberg is a tax collector in Florida. He's facing a lot of charges, a lot of sexual, sexual trafficking charges. He flipped on Matt Gaetz. What he says is, On more than one occasion, this individual was involved in sexual activities with several other girls. The congressman from Florida's 1st Congressional District and myself. Greenberg wrote in reference to the 17-year-old girl. From time to time, gas money or gifts, rent or partial tuition payments were made to several of these girls, including the individual who was not yet 18. I did see these acts occur firsthand, and Venmo transactions, Cash Apps, and other payments were made to these girls on behalf of the congressman. So, what does this mean? There's actually more to this. So, in this piece, I'm just pulling it up to show it to you. We're not going to read through the whole thing, but we'll go to the text messages. Where are they? Okay, there. Okay. In this piece, it also talks about how Joel Greenberg was trying to get a pardon from Roger Stone. This is when Trump had commuted his sentence before he had pardoned him. So what Roger Stone asked him to do was send me a list of all the things that you need to be pardoned for, and pay me $250,000. That's what this says. So, while I've not had any communications with MG, this is Matt Gaetz, that he absolutely has to know that the sex charges they hit me with would be with what they hit him with. All he has to do is explain to POTUS the situation is exposure, and it would be very easy. MG is like a son to POTUS. MG is like a brother to me. He said that, here's the other one. But Roger, come January 21st, I have to do what's best for me and my family. I know you understand. This is my life. I've got 2 young kids. You think Matt Gaetz is going to come visit me in prison? If I get you $250K in Bitcoin, would that help, or is this not a financial matter? So he offered to do this for Roger Stone. Roger Stone later then tells him, you better have the $250,000 for me. I think I'm going to get it. Ultimately, what happens is apparently Matt Gaetz gets involved and decides that to convince Trump to not pardon this guy. So what is the outcome from this? Well, the outcome from this is Matt Gaetz raped a 17-year-old. Now, let's be clear why I say rape. Because when you are having sex with a minor, they are not legally allowed to consent. So Matt Gaetz raped a 17-year-old. Matt Gaetz is still on the Judiciary Committee. Matt Gaetz is still being supported by Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy. Should nothing be done about this, it is going to be the standing position of the Republican Party, by not punishing them, that they are okay with one of their congresspeople having raped a 17-year-old and to be investigated by it, and have that congressperson still in their party, still in their chair position. That's what the Republican Party is standing for currently. When there is a Democrat who has issues like this, be it Katie Hill or Al Franken, they face consequences, like they should. Or in the case of Al Franken, because there was other allegations coming out against him, or they should have rode through it like Katie Hill did. What happened with Katie Hill was her ex, I don't remember if it was her husband or boyfriend, leaked nude photos of her. So she resigned. The Republican Party, on the other hand, backed Roy Moore, credibly accused child molester, backed Donald Trump, who is accused of sexual assault, sexual misconduct and assault and rape some 20 plus times, and advocated for it on television. He said the famous grab by the pussy tape. And then they stood behind Jim Jordan, who's accused of allowing wrestlers to be molested in Ohio State. And now they're backing Matt Gaetz. The Republican Party is the largest nest of sexual assault people and child porn, because they just had DJ Drudger, who was a reality star who was tied into a lot of politicians, was just arrested for child porn. Looks like QAnon might have the wrong party, but who knows? So that's where we stand on Matt Gaetz. Now we're going to go on to Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani's having a bad time. He's having a rough year. Well, actually, no, that's not true. He had a rough 2020. He won a Razzie for his part in in Borat 2. He had a press conference in the Four Seasons construction site, and his hair melted on national television while he was lying to people. So what happened to Giuliani on Wednesday was the FBI executed search warrants at Mr. Giuliani's apartment and carting away his electronic devices. Now, why did this happen? This happened because they're looking for information on whether he did not file to be lobbying for a foreign country, and this was during the first impeachment of Donald Trump, when he was lobbying the Ukraine to look into Burisma, and he and two other people, where are their names? It was Lev Parnas and Igor Fruga and Furman, whatever his name is. They were arrested because they were trying to flee the country, and they were his accomplices. So look, this is not a partisan thing. This investigation was opened in 2019. The actual search warrants and things were blocked for a while by the Justice Department until Merrick Garland went in. That doesn't mean that it's partisan. It means that Bill Barr was doing his job. Not his job as AG, but his job as cover-up man for Donald Trump. And I hope some of this goes back onto Bill Barr, because there have been few people who have been more destructive to the country and the rule of law than Bill Barr. If you want a hack AG who's going to protect you no matter what, Bill Barr is your man. So look, I don't know if there'll be charges against Giuliani, but this is not a political witch hunt. And this also has nothing to do with Hunter Biden, because there is somebody looking into Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden's not saying anything about it. He's not stopping the investigation. He's not going on television every day saying my son did nothing wrong. This investigation is a witch hunt. This investigation needs to stop right now. He's staying out of it. So that's what's happening there. So let's wrap this up. This one a little longer than the other ones. Now, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. And look, we went over a lot today. There's a lot going on. The Republicans are very anti-schooling, whether it is the bright futures they want to make in Florida. They want to control what your life is going to look like by stopping you from choosing certain careers because they won't fund them. They advocate for teaching you specific things, whether it's a true history of America or not. And if you try to do some type of history that explains a deeper part or a different idea than the rosy city on a hill, then you're communist, Marxist, socialist, Buddhist monument, anti-American person who hates America. And you should be punished for that. Let's see what else we went over. There was that crazy place in Florida. We went over the Georgia law. Georgia law is very bad. All these laws are very bad. They have different variations of bad, but once again, they're all useless. There's no point for any of them. There was no voter fraud. And these laws will not change anything except make it hard for people to vote. Let's see what else. West Virginia. Besides having the centrist king and crazy person who just wants to watch the country burn or give it slight adjustments instead of actually the things that need to make it better, Joe Manchin. And we have the governor there passing a trans athlete bill that he knows nothing about to fix a problem that isn't real. But hey, you gotta hate the trans people apparently. There's that. So let's see what else. We have Ben Shapiro and the new Republican standard from Ben Shapiro that the taxes for the wealthy are too high, and that the poor people need to pay more taxes. That is their stance on the Daily Wire. Poor people need to pay more taxes. And then we finally have Matt Gaetz, who, according to Joel Greenberg and the text and the information that he's given us, raped a 17-year-old and is still in his position as of recording this at least a day later. Unless... Nope. He's not... He's not been resigned or told to step down as far as I can see it, or I've gotten a headline from. So there's that. So look, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will be back, and I will see you in the next one.